Man, if Ole Miss can flip Deuce Knight, that would be so crucial.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. And today we're diving into the latest recruiting buzz. With Ole Miss successfully flipping Caleb Cunningham from Alabama, that was absolutely massive. The focus is now shifting to Deuce Knight, who they're pushing to flip from Auburn. Adding Deuce will be huge. Potentially moving this class into the top 10 is a strong statement for a program supposedly unable to pull off these type of flips. And I mean, narratives, right? Stay tuned for all the latest as we continue breaking down the Ole Miss recruiting class and what is next for the Rebels. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They offer great perspectives on the SEC and Ole Miss. Check out Locked On Auburn with Zach Blackerby as well. Check them out. They'll be able to hook you up. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll be entered for $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the Caleb Cunningham commitment was a big, big deal for Ole Miss, obviously. Moved Ole Miss on 3 up to like number 17 nationally. And it put all kinds of buzz into the recruiting class. Ole Miss flipped Dante Core from Auburn. Earlier in the day, they picked up their first 2026 player in Zion Legree. Ole Miss is having a really good week recruiting, and it might not be done. It might not be done. We'll talk about a Fong bomb that Steve Wilfong has put in about an interior offensive lineman in the next segment. But the player that was at the game, he is a good friend of Caleb Cunningham, who just flipped to Ole Miss. They hang out, they do stuff, all of that. It is Deuce Knight. Deuce Knight is a linchpin of this class, and he kind of has been all year. The whole time I've been talking about this recruiting class has been, Deuce Knight this, Deuce Knight that, and he's the only quarterback that Ole Miss is even looking at taking. That's how special of a player Deuce Knight is. He was committed to Notre Dame early in the process, and we were doing videos about, hey, when this is all said and done, he's probably going to end up at Ole Miss. We did those videos back in June. Notre Dame fans is like, there's no way this guy would leave Notre Dame. He loves it. He is intense to be Notre Dame, and he ended up decommitting and committing to Auburn. Now, the rumor is Auburn has a pretty nice offer for him, and Ole Miss is going to have to compete with that. I do not know where that sits or what's going on. I do know that he looks like he genuinely enjoys being up there. And he genuinely enjoys talking to Lane Kiffin and everything that the Ole Miss staff has. I get that Auburn is in desperate need of a quarterback. They are completely freaking out on the Plains right now because of Peyton Thorne and Walker White and all those guys. They just don't think that they are the answer. Deuce Knight is a 5-star quarterback. He was a reason for excitement in a recruiting class that has honestly been pretty good for Auburn over this cycle. But Deuce Knight leaving would change everything. If Deuce Knight flipped to Ole Miss, it would change the complete paradigm of what Auburn is. I have literally seen posts on message boards in Auburn that if Deuce Knight flips, Auburn should fire Hugh Freeze. I'm dead serious that I saw that. I could not believe I read that. But that is how important some people view Deuce Knight to this Auburn recruiting class. If Ole Miss is able to flip him, and like I said, he is a really good friend of Caleb Cunningham. And they were trying to get Caleb Cunningham to come to Auburn to play with Deuce Knight and all of that because Caleb Cunningham was committed to Alabama. And it just never stuck. It never stuck at all. And Deuce Knight, as it sits right now, he is a 5-star consensus player. about a 95. He's committed to play in the Navy All-American Bowl. It used to be the Army All-American Bowl. Now it's the Navy All-American Bowl. Go Navy. In San Antonio, he's going to play in that game with Winston Watkins, who we're going to talk about in the second segment a little bit as well. Good numbers. Really, really athletic player. Nearly 6'5", has a vertical jump that's just insanely out of this world. Runs a 4.3 40. Just a superb athlete. He is somebody that has Lamar Jackson talent. If you ask Brian Smith, who is the Locked On recruiting analyst, if you talk to him, you realize how good Deuce Knight could be as a talented football player. Now, it's going to be important for wherever he goes that he gets developed. Now, Deuce Knight saw in the Ole Miss Georgia game, a game that afterwards he stormed the field with Caleb Cunningham, and Caleb Cunningham already flipped. So it would make sense for people to wait for the other shoe to drop on that potentially. And the longer it gets after that, the more it's going to be, iffy. But it's not going to take much to see Deuce Knight, how he could be developed. And in this game, in this football game, Austin Simmons got a full series, and you got to see a 6'5" left-handed quarterback go in at quarterback. And he proceeded to drive Ole Miss straight down the field. A true freshman, or a redshirt freshman, being developed to the point where you could put him on the field against one of the better defenses in the entire country, and you're fine. You're running your offense. You're not just walking in and handing it off to Ulysses Bentley and punting, hoping that Jackson Dart comes back. You are playing football because you know your backup quarterbacks are developed at a level where you can. Deuce Knight saw that. He saw what Austin Simmons looked like. He knows that Austin Simmons, who will be draft eligible after the 2025 season for the NFL, that'll be his third year in college football. He would be draft eligible at that point. So it's not like Deuce Knight's going to have to sit for 3 years if he chose to flip to Ole Miss. He knows it would be a similar situation to where you come in and you redshirt just like Austin Simmons did, and you have a legit chance to be the starting quarterback in 2026 for 2 years, and then you go off to the NFL. That is what they're building in Oxford right now. Deuce Knight committing and flipping to Ole Miss, it would be crucial to this recruiting class because of the offensive tools that are coming in. It would be set up for the next 3 years, good to go. You don't even have to worry about it. At wide receiver with Caleb Cunningham, who is a Trey Harris level talent at wide receiver, you're going to get Winston Watkins, who has a little bit of that Elijah Moore wiggle in his game potentially. We'll talk about if he decides to commit, but all the rumors right now, everybody's talking about Ole Miss. And then you have Dylan Alford, who quietly is just handling his business and going through, and he's going to end up there. The wide receiver room that Ole Miss is bringing in is kind of different, kind of special. 2025 is going to have the Daquan Wright, but you also have tight ends that you've recruited, running backs like Shakai Mills-Knight. Ole Miss, after this big thing, they're not really pushing for AK Deer. And that tells you how much they really like Shakai Mills-Knight. But the linchpin in this whole thing, the whole thing that can take this recruiting class from a top 20 class to a top 10 class with the players that are going to come in is Deuce Knight. If Ole Miss can get a flip from a 5-star quarterback to add another 5-star to this class, it would be interesting. It would be really interesting with the number of 250 top 300 level players that Ole Miss is recruiting out of high school, and they're still going to be very active in the transfer portal. Transfer portal is not going anywhere, but you will have a recruiting class that's probably about 20, 25 players. It's going to look very familiar for people that used to do signing day because of that. But the transfer portal is going to be about as big because Ole Miss does have to replace like 50 players. Kind of interesting. Deuce Knight, after that Georgia game, after storming the field with his buddy Caleb Cunningham, it's going to be a pretty sweaty 3 weeks for the Auburn Tigers. Now, like I said, I think he has a pretty good offer to go there. So it's going to take a lot to flip him. But Deuce Knight is notoriously slow doing this. So I don't think anybody actually knows exactly where he stands at the moment. But you'll see all of the Ole Miss commitments they're just bombarding him right now. I'm sure the coaches are blowing him up as well. It's something to keep an eye on, honestly, if we're going to be real about it. So next, we dive into two major prospects that could make a huge impact for Ole Miss. LSU commitment right now, Devin Harper from Shreveport, a potential flip that would be a massive recruiting win. He's a top 100 player. And Winston Watkins from Venice High in Florida, a wide receiver loaded with a ton of talent. Lane Kiffin's closing in on a recruiting class that could be a game changer for the Rebels. You know, nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide on omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score a extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE, COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easier to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. So, Ole Miss is potentially in the game for a flip for an interior offensive lineman. Steve Wilfong has already RPM'd or crystal balled or whatever that's called, a flip from LSU for interior offensive lineman Devin Harper. If you look there, he's a top 100 interior offensive lineman. And listen, it is a big deal. It is a genuinely big deal whenever you flip a Louisiana kid away from LSU. If you get a kid flip from LSU from a Louisiana kid, hang that up. Take a picture of that. And Steve Wilfong is thinking Devin Harper, who was also at the Ole Miss Georgia game on Saturday, is about ready to flip. And you can see by the RPM that it's up about an 84% chance he ends up in Oxford, Mississippi. He's an interior offensive lineman, which means guard, center, something like that. And what you're seeing are skill positions start to be developed a little bit through the high school ranks. Now, Ole Miss is still going to go after the transfer portal and do what they can, but they're going to recruit these high-level players, and they're not going to settle at all. So we'll see exactly how it goes. For Ole Miss in this recruiting battle. Really good player, was one to keep an eye on as well. Now, another player that Ole Miss needs to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks is Winston Watkins, a wide receiver out of Venice, Florida. He's a guy that is not committed to anyone anymore, but he has been committed to Colorado and Texas A&M. He is not committing until signing day, and he's somebody that looks really, really good. He's a top 250 type player, a slot type wide receiver at 5'9", 170. He has phone booth quickness. Winston Watkins is a really good player. He plays in Florida, which means athletically, I don't know if it's even matched, even countrywide, as far as athletic players playing in Florida. And he is somebody that can help your offense. You look at what Caden Lee is doing. You look at what Jordan Watkins did in the slot position. He's a guy that is ready-made to come in and take over the slot day one. He could. He doesn't have to, and they're not going to ask him to, but he could do it. He has excellent hands, excellent quickness. He is hard to bring down. Like I said, he has phone booth quickness to where he can go side to side. He is going to be in the Navy All-American game with Deuce Knight. We talked about Deuce Knight going to San Antonio a little bit earlier. Caleb Cunningham is going to be at the Under Armour All-American game, so I'll get to see him at that game. But Ole Miss players kind of spreading out through these all-star competitions. I'm pretty fired up, honestly, about what could happen in the wide receiver room, just off the 3 wide receivers that Ole Miss could potentially end up with this year. I mean, you're talking about a 4-star in Dylan Alford. I don't think anybody needs to forget about Dylan Alford. He is a heck of a player. He is somebody that is a tailor-made outside wide receiver in this offense. And he can run inside. He can play everywhere. He's a really athletic guy. He's somebody that has a chance to be really good. And he gets forgot about in this wide receiver room because of what they have right now. Because the other commitment that they have is Caleb Cunningham, who is a top wide receiver in the entire country, number 2 in some things. Like I said, he's the Under Armour All-American game participant that he's going to do. Really big-time player. He is the Trey Harris of the future in this Ole Miss class. So we'll see exactly what's going on there. And then you have Winston Watkins, who is that tailor-made slot-type wide receiver. And you have Nareel White, and you have a bunch of players in the building right now. This wide receiver room is going to be fine. When you look at the way that they have recruited, you can see definitely a path to stardom for each and every single commitment that comes in. If they can do it, if they have what it takes, if they have that it factor, they have a chance to be really, really good. I'm impressed about what Ole Miss could be with Winston Watkins, with Caleb Cunningham, with Dylan Alford at wide receiver, with Austin Simmons, and potentially somebody like, if he decided to flip, Deuce Knight at quarterback, and then you have the running backs of Shakai Mills-Knight and the older statesman, Logan Diggs, big interior offensive lineman. You can see that Lane Kiffin is turning success on the field into success off the field, which on-field success, there's a kind of a chicken or an egg scenario that people deal with. It's like you need the Jimmies and the Jimmies and the Joes on the field to take your program to the next level. But do you need to be relevant and good to actually get those players? Like I said, it's a chicken or the egg situation. Right now, Lane Kiffin is taking success on the field, which Ole Miss is going for their third 10-win season in 4 years and a chance to make the college football playoff. And they're turning that over into high school recruiting success, which they haven't been happening. The success that Ole Miss had on the field is largely due to the transfer portal up to this point. Ole Miss is kind of plugging away at high school recruiting, and now some of those skill athletes, you're starting to see them show up. Listen, Lane Kiffin at wide receiver, everybody talks about quarterbacks and everything else going on. Lane Kiffin, at his core, when he first started at USC, was a wide receivers coach. Lane Kiffin recruited that Alabama wide receiver unit that was so feared in like 2018. Lane Kiffin's the one that recruited those guys. He identified those guys. He brought those guys to Alabama, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, and all of those guys. Lane Kiffin was the dude. The other guys just got to coach those dudes. Lane Kiffin is finding wide receivers that fit the bill of being superstars potentially right now in high school for Ole Miss. I'm telling you, Caleb Cunningham has a chance to be special. I don't know if he's only going to be 17 years old next year. Who knows? But he's going to be that good. And you're going to have Dylan Alford, who's going to probably surprise, and you're going to have potentially Winston Watkins. We'll have to see what he does as well. I'm pretty fired up about what can happen. Like I said, Watkins is a phone booth player. He has a lot of Elijah Moore in his game. He's not as big as Elijah Moore, but hands-wise and all that, he is that prototypical Florida-type slot wide receiver that they're just famous for. If you go back to the history of the Florida Gators and the Florida State Seminoles and all that, they always had a Peter Warrick or a Jaquez Green or something like that playing in that slot receiver. This is that prototypical type wide receiver. Was it Santonio Holmes at Miami? There's always been that little wide receiver that just had the chance to be really, really special for the Florida schools as well. Listen, we start looking ahead tomorrow in the Florida LSU game to Florida and what we'll be watching. what we'll be watching in that game versus LSU. What is it? What's going to happen? Is DJ Lagway going to play? What is his availability? And then we're going to turn the page and wonder about Trey Harris. Is Trey Harris going to come back into the fold? How will Jackson Dart handle it? And could we see Logan Diggs make his season debut down in Gainesville? Stay tuned. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL in one place. This will be a fun week to sports bet for people, with a potential Georgia revenge tour on the horizon and Texas going to Arkansas. This weekend could be a lot of fun. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view latest play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Join FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's turn the page a little bit. I mean, we've talked about the playoffs. We talked about recruiting. It's been a really fun bye week for an Ole Miss fan. It's been a ton more fun than it was after the LSU loss. This bye week has been really fun. But we have college football tomorrow. And there's a couple of things that you need to pay attention to in tomorrow. If anybody's interested in Ole Miss in Atlanta, pretty much the only scenario that I see that Ole Miss has a chance to get to Atlanta involves an Arkansas beating Texas win. That's one of those things. I have that little spreadsheet to where you can see exactly what the tiebreakers are. That is something that we're paying attention to. So root for Arkansas on Saturday. Then you have Florida versus LSU. I mean, it's going to be a tough game for the Florida Gators. We'll have to see if DJ Lagway is going to play. Is he going to play against Ole Miss? I would not put a quarterback that is not 100% moving, especially somebody as prized as DJ Lagway, against that defensive line, but that's just me. Florida's playing for a bowl game, so we'll see exactly how that goes. I want to see if Trey Harris comes back in this football game. Is this the game that Trey Harris comes back into the fold? And how does Jackson Dart handle Trey Harris coming back into the fold? Do you revert back to the offense that was there in the beginning of the season where Ole Miss was doing duck and chucks downfield because of how good Trey Harris is? Or is Trey Harris just going to be incorporated into what Ole Miss has done over the last 2 or 3 weeks where they've been really, really good? I mean, the second half, Oklahoma, Arkansas almost completely, in the Georgia game, the offense was fantastic. There's no reason to change that at all. So we'll see exactly how they handle that as well. Another question that we're going to have next week going into the Florida game is this week the first week that Logan Diggs kind of gets game time on the field? Now, listen, nobody's expecting Logan Diggs to walk in there and have 20 carries. Anybody that says that, ignore them. But what Ole Miss needs is the senior leadership and another body on the field and somebody that can tote the rock from time to time to give people a different look. Ole Miss does not have a Logan Diggs type back on their roster right now. It's not Dominic Thomas, that's not Rashad Amos, and that is not Ulysses Bentley. It will provide a different look. The other thing that people need to be aware of, the callus of contact has not really happened yet for Logan Diggs. And that was one of the reasons I did not want Logan Diggs to come back and debut against Georgia, because there is a callus that develops just from taking licks over and over again. Whenever you take it, the first time, it's a shock to the system. It can cause some ball security issues and things like that. So that one made me a little bit wary of the Georgia game as well. But the Florida game, I'm all for. Going out there, don't turn over the football, but go ahead and work and get that callus built up against Florida for a couple of carries and against Mississippi State, and hopefully into the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, you might be more and more ready to go. But we are just about to the end of the time to where Logan Diggs can get that callus ready for the playoffs. Logan Diggs almost has to be ready for the Florida game to get that callus on himself. He's a good back. I think Ulysses Bentley is still going to be one of the guys that shows up. I think you'll see Rashad Amos. I think you'll see Dominic Thomas. Dominic Thomas against Georgia played the Snoop Connor role, by the way. I don't think I didn't notice. He played the Snoop Connor role of not playing the whole game and coming in the fourth quarter fresh, and he was running for 8-9 yards a carry. I mean, he did a decent job at the end of the game. So we'll see how it goes. I've always talked about what this running back group could be. You have a Ulysses Bentley IV who has a chance to be a plus Jerry and Ely if he's used like that. He's not being used like that right now, but he has that ability. You have the Henry Parrish at that point, which is kind of nobody. He doesn't exist. Henry Parrish got injured a little bit early in the year. And then you have the Snoop Connor, which Dominic Thomas is kind of filling that role at the moment. And he's doing a decent job of it. It's worth keeping an eye on. This Florida game is going to be absolutely massive. I do think Ole Miss as a football team is mature enough to handle the bye week and go into the Florida game. There's many vibes right now, all of the vibes right now of the 2008 season, and I think they're going to be able to do it. So we'll see exactly how it goes and what can happen. I do want to thank everybody for putting up with me during the bye week. This is the Friday show. We're getting ready for the game week action coming up. Should be a lot of fun, but thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And also exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss insider. It's the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's our texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everybody. Happy bye week.